And now we're on Daf Chesam in Beis. B'nizakin nami nemahachi. The nizak is coming to collect idis because that's his right to collect idis. But the lokeach could say to the nizak, "You don't. I'm going to make sure that you can't collect idis because I'm going to return the ziburis back to the mazik, to the mocher mazik, and therefore." You'll be stuck because now the mazik has b'nei chorin and it's ziburis, and all now the limit and the restriction of your rights is to collect from ziburis. So therefore, the Gemara has an objection here to the interpretation that we had back on Daf Ches Amid Beis of Hachamayaskinon. Kigon de lokach idis bachron. Ella, says the Gemara, we have no choice but to say that hachamayaskinon. What's the case? What's the scenario of the brisa? Biyasme. Now yisomim are not chayev to pay the chovos of their late father. So the Mischayev himself is gone. He's dead. And he leaves Yisomim, the Lavnei Pironinu. They don't have an obligation to be Porea, the Chov of their father, because when their father died, there was no karka in the estate. So the only shibud that the Noshim could have is on the father. But he's gone. V'shibud delay, alei didei ramya. So any shibud of the mischayev, which would mean the mazik, the love or the baal, is ramya lei. It's not on the yisomim, but it's on him, and he's gone. Hilkoch lekelamemar hachi. Therefore, the lokeach who purchased the karka, he has no right to say, well, I'm going to give the ziburis back to the mocher. The mocher is dead already. And if he returns the ziburis to the yarshim, then a in the piron of the chov of their father. They're only chai from shibudin. So therefore, the noshim will continue to collect from the lokeach. And we're back to our question again. If we're talking about a case where the last karka to be sold was idis, then why did the Brisa say that each one is gova kidino? Each one should be able to collect from the idis because that's the last karka that was sold, and all the other lokchim have right to say, I left you karka in the hands of the mocher of the mischayim. Ella, says the Gemara, the reason why each one is gova kidino is mishum di amar lahu, because the lokeach could put forward the following claim: time up, my Rabbanan. Why did the Rabbanan say that the last piece of karka to be sold is the one from which the notion will collect? Is because why did they do that? Mishum takanta didi. The lokeach has the right to say this halacha was formulated and established by the chacham to protect my interest, meaning the lokeach's interest, so that the lokeach should not lose his karka that he bought kedasu kedin. He purchased, he spent kesef mole, as we saw in the parsha. He said, no, but takanta lo nichale. We have a principle that a person could say lo nichale v'takanta takinu le rabbana. You made a takana on my behalf. I waive my rights to that takana. Di kid omerava kol omeri efshi b'takanas chachamim kegon zu shomim lo. My kegon zu ke the Rav Huna the Rav Huna yichol isha shtom lebaile nizonos ve'nizoch. Now, the Rabbana made a takana in ksuba that a woman collects mizonos, and as a result, she has to quid pro quo give him her wages, her income, which is called maisi yodea. And she has a right to say, you know what? The deal is off. I don't want your mizonos, and I don't want to give you my maisi yadayim. I'm a fancy, Fifth Avenue lawyer and I'm making tons of money, I'd rather give up on my mizonos and retain my rights to my Masechet time. I'll come out ahead. So that's called the principle of Rava. Ha'omer yefshib tekonos chacham kigon zu is shomin lo. We accept that time. And the same thing as the Isha, in the case of mizonos, we could apply to the lekuchos if we want to allow the lekuchos to collect from the last karka with the taina that I left you b'nei chori, and now he has right to say, I give up on that takana which was made on my behalf. And therefore, I would rather that each one should collect kidino. The Gemara now goes further in understanding the last scenario, that there was one lokach who purchased all the karkos from the Mechayev, and the last karka to buy was idis. What happens if there were two lekuchos? Pshita, it's a din pashut with regard to the person who bought all the sados of the Meschayev, and he bought the idis bachrona, that if now he went ahead and sold it to a second buyer, that's called lokech sheni, umachar lokech beinanis v'ziburis v'shiras ha'idis lefanov. So he went ahead after buying three different karkos of three different qualities from the mocher, who's the Meschayev. He now pawned off, he sold the beinanis and ziburis, leaving in his rishus only the idis. In such a case, the din is that leisu kula v'ligbumi idis to achronahi. In other words, at the moment that the lokech purchased the beinanis and ziburis, the sada was meshubad. And the shibu was chal on the sada, whether it's the beinanis for the malveh or the ziburis for the isha. So that's takonis chachamim. And we have a rule which the chacham established that you don't collect from a shubadim if you leave nechasim b'nei chorin in the hands of the Meschayev. So even afterwards, when he purchases not only beinanis and ziburis, but he finally at the end purchases idis, nevertheless the shibud is still left on this sada for the beinanis and ziburis. So again, even though we established before that the lokech has right to say any rotze b'takonas chachamim, because that takana was made for his benefit, that's only if all the sados are still in his hand, and he can give the noshim, the beinanis and the ziburis. But here, he sold all the karkos to a lokech sheni, ha-beinanis v'ziburis lesnu gabe. So when he sold both beinanis and ziburis to a second buyer, and he left in his rishus only what you call it idis, motzi lemeimelahu, he could say to the noshim, gvu mi beinanis v'ziburis, as far as the beinanis and ziburis are concerned, which I sold to lokech sheni, go collect from the beinanis and ziburis from lokech sheni. So nichali v'takan to the rabbana. I'm not happy with the takonas chachamim, because he doesn't have the beinanis and ziburis in his possession. But he can't say that regarding the idis because that's the only karka that he has in his hands. So the Gemara now vacillates. Aval mochar idis. What about the case where lokech rishon sold to lokech sheni idis v'shir li atzma? What does he leave for himself? Beinanis v'ziburis. What would be the din? Would they all be able to collect from the lokech sheni, which means they all collect from idis, because that's the achrona. And once it's the achrona, because that's what he sold at the end, he retained his ownership on Beinis and Ziburis, then the Takonas Chacham ain't go Mishubadin, B'makom Sheish B'nei Chorin, is going to be chal now on the Idis. Or should we say no? They could be gova from the Lokech Rishon. Savar Abaye L'meimer Abaye, who's going to be rejected by Rava, said that Asu Kula Gova Mi Idis. All the Noshim now will jump and pounce on the Idis from Lokech Sheni, because that's the Achrona. And the Shibud is now chal on the Achrona, which is the Idis. And the Lokech Rishon is going to say, Hinachti l'cha makom in the Idis. And now when he sells the Idis, the Shibud to the Noshim is on the Idis. Amalei Rava says that by no. How could the Lokech Rishon push away the Noshim to look and, force them and chuck them onto Lokech Sheni, because the Takonas Chachamim that you collect from Bnei Chorin first is Ma Mocha Rishon L'Sheni. Included in the sale is all the rights that the Lokech Rishon has, and they are now transferred over to Lokech Sheni. Kol Zchus Shetav L'Yado. Whatever Zchus the Rishon has are now transferred over to the Sheni. So whatever taina the Lokech Rishon would be able to taina, namely that I left you Makom Ligvos, is now Lokech Sheni has the right to make that taina. V'kevan de, at the time that the Lokech Rishon still held on to his Idis before he sold it to Lokech Sheni, Ilu also, if the notion would have come, Gabi Lokech Rishon, Motzi Advilahu, they would have rights to, he would have rights to force them to collect from Beinis and Ziburis that are in his Rishus. V'yafal pichein, Dechizavni, Beinis Ziburis. Now he was mocked to Lokech Sheni, Beinis Ziburis, Akati, Idis B'nei Chorin Avi. The Lokech Rishon still has B'nei Chorin of Idis, because he didn't sell the Idis until the Achrona. And the Chacham made a takana that Ein Nifram Nechas Shubalim calls man to Ika B'nei Chorin. So therefore the Noshim have no recourse to collect from Idis and Beinis that was sold to the Lokech Sheni, and they only have recourse to collect from the Bnei Chori, which in this case is the Idis of the Lokech Rishon. So Memela, the Shibud is Chal for all of them on Idis. And even though now the Mischayev sold his Idis, but he's selling an Idis with a Shibud to all three Noshim, and Motzi Amarle, and the first Lokech Rishon has the right to say, Lo nicha b'hai takana. I'm not happy with this takana. Let them all collect from the Beinis and Ziburis in the Rishus of Lokech Sheni. And Memei Lokech Sheni nami Motzi Amarle, Givei mi Beinis and Ziburis. Go collect from the Beinis and Ziburis that is in the hands of Lokech Rishon. If the Lokech Rishon only sold Idis, so Lokech Sheni has the right to say, go back to the Lokech Rishon and collect from his Beinis and Ziburis. Why? Because the Mechira of the Rishon to the Sheni includes within it all the zchuyos that he could have had as a taina to this karka. So the Chizavin, when he sold his Idis to the Lokech Sheni, so that the Lokech Sheni purchased, together with this karka of Idis, all the rights that the Lokech Rishon had in this karka. And since the Lokech Rishon has rights to push off the notion to Beinis Ziburis, Lokech Sheni has the same rights. Okay, now we get to Rav. Rav has another din. Amar Rava, Ruvain borrows money, and then Machar calls Sadosa l'Shimon. So Shimon now purchases money that had a shibud to the malva, and amongst the Sidosov that he sold to Shimon, there were Idis, Benis, and Ziburus. Holach Shimon now lokech u'mocher soda achas. Rashi says he sold a Beninis Lil Levi. So now we have a lokech sheni Levi, and the lokech sheni purchased Beninis. Uba balchov de Ruven, and the balchov of Ruven, the malva of Ruven, now has rights to collect Beninis, and he could collect from Lekuchos, because Ruven doesn't have anything to pay up. And now Rav establishes that the Malva has two choices, two alternatives. And the Brera is biyadam. Ratza ligvos mizeh, gove. Ratza ligvos mizeh, gove. The Malva now has recourse to both Lekuchos. He can either collect from, again, he has rights to Beininis, and Lokech Sheni Levi has Beininis, so therefore the Malva could come to the Lokech Sheni and collect his Chof and Lokech Sheni of Beininis. Or alternatively, he could decide he wants to go back to Lokech Rishon Shimon and collect from Shimon. Now, what could he collect from Shimon? Shimon sold Beininis to Levi. So what's left in the hands of Shimon? Idis and Ziburis, but Balchov doesn't have rights to collect Idis, so therefore he'll collect Ziburis. So the Gemara says that this ruling of Rava only applies La'amarna Ela Zavan Beinanis, that the Lokech Sheni, that's Levi, purchased Beinanis. So therefore the Balchov has rights to collect from Lokech Sheni, because he has rights to collect Beinanis. Aval Zavan Idis V'Ziburis. If, on the other hand, what did the Lokech Rishon sell to the Lokech Sheni? Sold him Idis V'Ziburis. That means he retained his ownership on Beinanis. Lo. In such a case, the Balchov Malva has no rights to collect from the Lokech Sheni, because what did the Lokech Sheni buy? Idis and Ziburis. And now he could go back to the Lokech Rishon to collect Beinanis. Why? The Omer Le, the Lokech Sheni says to the Malva, Lahachi diakti or daiki vizavni, I made sure, and I was very meticulous and careful, to purchase Idis v'Ziburis, right? These are karkos that you don't collect from. They're not ruiyos l'cha, right? Your din is to collect from Beinanis, and I was very careful, says Lokech Sheni Levi, that I left in the hands of Lokech Rishon Beinanis to allow you, Mr. Malva, to collect from Lokech Rishon. And the Gemara continues, Vafilu Zavan Beinanis. Even if Lokech Sheni purchased Beinanis, which L'chora would mean that the Malva has rights to collect from Lokech Sheni, Nami Lo Amaron, we're not going to say that the Balchov, meaning the Malva, will collect from Lokech Sheni. Ela de lo shir Beinanis de Kavose, meaning there was only one Beinanis in the hands of the Lokech Rishon, and that's what Lokech Sheni purchased. I'm sorry, and that's what Lokech Sheni left in the hands of the Lokech Rishon. The Lomotzi Amalei Hinachti L'Chamokum L'Gabi Shimon. Right? Levi can't say, I left you Beinanis in the hands of Lokech Rishon. I will share Beinanis the Kavasi Gabi Shimon. If, let's say, Ruvain, the Lova, had two different karkos, both of which were Beinanis, and when Shimon bought the Beinanis, he sold one of the two Beinanis to Levi. Lo gavi mine, the Balchov, meaning the Malva, cannot come and collect from Levi the Lokech Sheni, because Matzi Omerle Hinach L'Chomakum Ligvos, I left Beinanis in the hands of Lokech Rishon. Omer Abaye, Ruvain Shemachar Sadal L'Shim Bachrayus. What happens if Ruvain sells Karka to Shimon Bachrayus? That means if a shibud is chal on this karka, and the malva will come and confiscate the karka from Shimon the buyer, then the buyer has recourse to go back to Ruvain and get his money back. The asa balchov de Ruvain v'torah. So Ruvain's malva came and he collected the sada mishimon from the buyer. Dina hu di asa Ruvain mishtoi dina b'adei. We have a halacha that you cannot claim in Bezdin, put forth a tvi in Bezdin against someone unless you're a baldover. And l'chor Ruvain's no longer baldover. He already sold the karka, and the issue is whether the balchov, meaning Ruvain's malva, could collect from Shimon the lokeach. Then also Ruvain dina b'adei. Ruvain could be tovea the malva if he has a claim. Let's say he says parati or whatever he wants to claim. And lo motzi omale, and the malva has no right to say, "Who are you to be tovea me in Bezdin?" La baltvam didia. Why? Because if you'll successfully establish your rights to confiscate the karka from the lokeach, then the lokeach who bought this field bachrais is going to come back to me and demand his rebate. And ikar diami, there's another lashon that says afilu shelo bachrais. There's a moral element here, an ethical element. Even if Shimon the buyer has no recourse through achrayus to go back to the mocher to Ruvain and get back a rebate because Ruvain sold the below achrayus, and he says, you're buying a jack in the box, and whatever is in this field that I'm selling, if there's a shibud, that's your problem. Nevertheless, Ruvain is still considered a baldovar, and he can still argue in Bezdin litigate against the malva. Why? Nami. Tarumas is already an ethical concept, not a monetary concept. And he says, I'm not going to be very comfortable if Shimon says, why did you sell me a field knowing full well that there's a shibud and the malva is going to come and confiscate the field from me, and then I'm out all the thousands of dollars that I paid for the karka. And that's a taina that he has against Ruvain, Erev Yom Kippur, right? It's taromas. And Ruvain doesn't want to have that taina over his head. Okay, then this is where we'll stop. Okay, then let me take this opportunity to wish you a great Shabbos.